Welcome back to True Crime Case Files, where we dive deep into the most chilling and complex cases. Today, we explore a murder that unfolded on a whirlwind wedding day, which took a shocking turn when the groom exposed his bride's trans identity in front of all their guests. What followed was a deadly confrontation, and the truth unraveling in the most unexpected ways. Brandon Whitmore was 32 years old, a rising assistant professor of political science at Ohio State University. He was known for his confidence and charisma, both in the classroom and at social gatherings. But while his professional life was thriving, his personal life had always been more complicated. Brandon was impulsive, prone to temper flare-ups, and sometimes overlooked the warning signs in relationships. In early 2015, Brandon met Melissa Stanislav. She was a 28-year-old girls' basketball coach at a high school in Columbus, Ohio. Their meeting seemed like fate, a chance encounter at a local charity event where Melissa had been coaching a team of young girls from underprivileged neighborhoods. Brandon was immediately drawn to her elegance and poise, and they struck up a conversation. From there, a whirlwind romance took off. They quickly bonded over their shared passion for sports, fitness, and education, and their courtship moved at lightning speed. Within a few months, they were planning a wedding. Their romance, though chaste and built on emotional connection, was not without its red flags. Melissa kept certain aspects of her life private, particularly her past. Brandon's friends noticed how secretive Melissa could be, especially when it came to her personal history. For example, she outright refused to let Brandon see any of her childhood photos. But Brandon brushed off these concerns. He was swept up in the idea of marriage and building a future with a beautiful woman who seemed perfect on the surface. Friends and family expressed doubts about Melissa's reluctance to open up about certain topics, such as her childhood, but Brandon dismissed these concerns, convinced that love would overcome any obstacles. The couple began planning a grand wedding for late June 2015 to be held at a historic church in downtown Columbus. Guests from across Ohio, including Brandon's colleagues from Ohio State, were invited. The wedding seemed to be on track to be a beautiful traditional affair, until the secrets that had been kept hidden beneath the surface began to unravel in the most public and tragic way possible. What should have been the happiest day of their lives would soon end in death. On the afternoon of June 27, 2015, at approximately 3:30 p.m., Brandon Whitmore's body was found in the men's restroom of the Trinity Episcopal Church in downtown Columbus, Ohio. The church had just hosted Brandon and Melissa's wedding ceremony only a few hours earlier. It was a small, intimate gathering, and guests were still milling about the reception hall when a groomsman, Greg Langston, noticed that Brandon had been missing for an unusually long time, over 3 hours. Concerned, Greg went looking for him and discovered the locked bathroom door. After repeatedly knocking and calling out to Brandon with no response, Greg, growing anxious, forced the door open. Inside, he found a gruesome scene. Brandon's lifeless body slumped against the toilet stall, his pants pulled down, and multiple gunshot wounds visible on his torso and crotch area. Blood had splattered across the bathroom floor and walls. Greg, in shock, stumbled back and shouted for help. Panic erupted as wedding guests rushed to the scene. Greg immediately called 911, his voice trembling as he described the horrific discovery. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was already too late. Brandon was pronounced dead at the scene. According to reports, Greg was visibly shaken but remained composed as he explained the situation to the first responders. The bathroom, now a crime scene, was cordoned off, and wedding guests, still dressed in their formal attire, were left stunned in disbelief as the joyful celebration turned into a tragedy. Columbus police officers arrived soon after. The initial reaction of those on the scene ranged from shock to confusion. Melissa, who had been missing for some time, became the immediate focus of attention as investigators worked to unravel the chaotic and violent events that had just unfolded. Columbus police arrived quickly at Trinity Episcopal Church after receiving the 911 call. Detective Ray Mathis, a veteran of the force known for his meticulous approach, led the investigation. Mathis and his team secured the crime scene, carefully examining the bathroom where Brandon Whitmore was found. Blood spattered the walls and floor, and the position of Brandon's body, his pants down, multiple gunshot wounds on his chest and crotch, indicated a violent struggle had taken place. Brandon had also sustained defensive wounds on his arms, suggesting he had tried to fight off his attacker. The murder weapon, a small handgun, was later discovered in a trash can just outside the church. It had been hastily discarded and wiped clean of fingerprints. Detectives immediately began interviewing the guests, trying to piece together the events leading up to the murder. What they learned shocked everyone. Witnesses described a chaotic scene during the wedding reception, which had taken place shortly before Brandon's death. According to multiple accounts, Brandon had made a sudden and shocking outburst in front of the wedding guests. Just after the ceremony, during the reception toast, he had stood up and began screaming, "My bride's a guy," over and over again, pointing at Melissa. He went on to reveal that Melissa was a man and still had male genitalia, stunning the entire room. The guests were horrified as Brandon continued his public tirade, angrily denouncing Melissa for keeping her trans identity hidden from him. Witnesses described how Melissa had run out of the reception hall in tears, humiliated and devastated by Brandon's cruel revelation. The wedding party had been thrown into chaos, with guests unsure how to respond to the shocking information. Some had tried to console Brandon, while others rushed after Melissa. The outburst provided a clear motive: humiliation, betrayal, and anger. The police immediately shifted their focus to Melissa, who had disappeared from the church after the incident. Detective Mathis and his team began searching for Melissa, aware that she was the last person seen with Brandon before his death. As the investigation continued, the police focused on gathering more information about the couple's relationship, the wedding itself, and the explosive confrontation that had led to such a deadly conclusion. Melissa Whitmore Stanislav, 28, became the prime suspect almost immediately after Brandon's death. Melissa had fled the wedding reception following Brandon's shocking public outburst, leaving behind a devastated crowd. Friends and family described Melissa as usually poised and elegant, but in recent months, she had become increasingly stressed, trying to keep a major part of her identity hidden from Brandon: the fact that she was transgender. Born Nell Stanislav, Melissa had known she was trans since her teenage years, but she never told Brandon. She feared that revealing the truth would lead to rejection and ruin the life she had built. During their whirlwind romance, Melissa had managed to keep her secret. The couple's relationship was quick and intense, and Melissa was cautious about physical intimacy, often explaining her reluctance by saying she wanted to wait to have sex until they were married. Brandon, though frustrated, accepted her reasons, eager to make their relationship work. However, this delicate balance came crashing down in the days leading up to their wedding. According to investigators, just 2 days before the wedding, Brandon accidentally walked in on Melissa while she was changing. Melissa had been in the bathroom of their shared apartment when Brandon entered, unexpectedly. In that brief, fateful moment, Brandon saw Melissa naked and realized that she had male genitalia. Shocked and furious, Brandon demanded an explanation. Melissa tried to explain her situation, but Brandon couldn't handle the truth. He stormed out, but the couple eventually made up, at least on the surface, just in time for the wedding. However, Brandon's anger festered beneath the surface. Melissa had long dreamed of undergoing gender reassignment surgery, but simply couldn't afford the procedure on her salary as a high school girls' basketball coach. The cost, combined with her fear of losing her job if her trans identity was discovered, weighed heavily on her. She worried that if the school found out, she'd be fired, and all her dreams would be crushed. Her fears were not unfounded. 2015 was a time of growing awareness for trans rights, but discrimination was still widespread, particularly in conservative communities like the one in which Melissa lived and worked. Brandon's accidental discovery put Melissa in an impossible situation, one that tragically spiraled out of control. When questioned by police, Melissa Whitmore Stanislav remained calm but was visibly shaken. Her eyes darted nervously as she sat across from the investigators, but she kept her composure, maintaining a soft-spoken, polite demeanor. Melissa firmly denied killing her husband, Brandon, but admitted that she had been terrified of what he might do after his shocking outburst at the reception. During her interview, Melissa admitted to police that she feared what Brandon might do after the wedding. "He wasn't the type to just let things go," she said. "I was scared he'd ruin my life. I could lose my job, everything I worked for." As a girls' basketball coach at a local high school, Melissa knew that if her trans identity became public, she could be fired. The financial and emotional toll would be devastating, especially since she couldn't afford the gender reassignment surgery to fully align her body with her identity. Despite her fears, Melissa denied any involvement in Brandon's murder. "I didn't kill him. I would never do that," she said, though her voice wavered slightly as the weight of the situation settled in. Police took note of her shaken state but remained skeptical as the investigation continued. Gina Stanislav, 54, Melissa's mother, was the second person the police turned to in their investigation. A sharp-tongued woman originally from San Francisco, Gina was known for her unconventional lifestyle and strong opinions. A tenured professor of Tibetan Buddhism at Ohio State University, she was no stranger to pushing societal boundaries. As detectives interviewed her, they quickly realized that Gina, much like her daughter, had her own complicated relationship with identity and gender norms. Gina openly admitted to investigators, quite candidly, that she enjoyed dressing up as a man and visiting gay bars where she would engage in sexual encounters with gay men, despite being married at the time. She saw it as a form of expression, telling the police, "I like to break gender binaries. It's freeing." Gina's frankness took the investigators by surprise. Despite her open attitude about gender and sexuality, Gina was fiercely protective of her daughter, Melissa. She had been complicit in helping Melissa keep her trans identity a secret from Brandon, believing that telling him would destroy her daughter's future. Gina admitted that she had urged Melissa not to disclose her gender identity, warning her about the potential fallout, not only with Brandon, but also with her job as a girls' basketball coach. "The world isn't kind to people like Melissa," Gina told investigators, "and I didn't want to see her lose everything." During her interrogation, Gina was defiant, angrily dismissing any suggestion that she had played a role in Brandon's murder. "I would never hurt anyone," she asserted, her voice rising. "What happened at that wedding was between my daughter and her husband. I had nothing to do with it." Despite her strong denial, the police couldn't ignore her strained relationship with Brandon, which had become apparent over time. Gina had never approved of how he treated Melissa, particularly during the wedding when he humiliated her in front of family and friends. Investigators sensed that Gina's anger toward Brandon might have fueled the motive for violence, even if she claimed otherwise. Gina's defiance and emotional volatility raised further suspicions among investigators. "You don't know the whole story," she snapped during one particularly tense moment. "Brandon was not who he appeared to be. He hurt my daughter, and I would do anything to protect her." This admission only deepened the officer's interest in her involvement in the case. Despite her insistence on innocence, Gina remained a key figure in the investigation, with her complicated relationship with both Melissa and Brandon continuing to raise red flags. On July 1, 2015, the investigation took a dramatic turn. It was a hot, humid afternoon in Columbus, Ohio, when detectives received new information that would change the direction of the case. A wedding guest had come forward, providing a critical lead that shed new light on the events leading up to Brandon Whitmer's murder. According to the guest, Brandon had been involved in an affair with his adopted sister, Chloe Whitmore, for several months before the wedding. This revelation shook the investigation and introduced a new layer of complexity. Detectives immediately shifted their focus. Chloe, 26, had always been close to Brandon, but no one had suspected their relationship had crossed such boundaries. The affair had been ongoing during Brandon's engagement to Melissa. In the days leading up to the wedding, Chloe had started feeding Brandon suspicions that Melissa was hiding something. Chloe had long suspected that Melissa wasn't who she appeared to be and had used her relationship with Brandon to dig deeper. Chloe's jealousy of Melissa, combined with her own strained relationship with Brandon, created a toxic dynamic that investigators realized could have played a crucial role in what happened on the wedding day. Chloe's betrayal had another layer. She had been using the affair to leverage control over Brandon. The two had grown more possessive of each other as time went on, and Chloe knew that revealing Melissa's secret could destroy the relationship. However, she hadn't anticipated Brandon's public outburst at the wedding. Her plan to keep Brandon close by controlling the information backfired when he lost his temper and humiliated Melissa in front of their guests. Detectives believe this affair provided the missing piece to understanding the twisted family dynamics. The stress, betrayal, and manipulation Brandon experienced may have pushed him over the edge during the wedding reception, leading to his shocking outburst. But the affair also brought Chloe under the microscope as a potential accomplice or instigator in Melissa's actions that night. This new evidence, combined with the testimony from wedding guests, gave the police a clearer picture of the events that led to the deadly confrontation in the church bathroom. Melissa's humiliation, compounded by the betrayal of Chloe's affair with Brandon, became the critical twist that reshaped the investigation. As the investigation deepened, detectives turned their attention to Chloe Whitmore, Brandon's 26-year-old adopted sister. Chloe, a free-spirited bartender who worked at a popular local spot, had always been known for causing drama within the family. Now, with the new revelation of her affair with Brandon, Chloe became a key suspect. When investigators brought Chloe in for questioning on July 2, 2015, she made a surprising confession. She had also had a brief affair with Melissa months before the wedding. Chloe, originally adopted from China, had always felt somewhat disconnected from the rest of the Whitmore family who were white. This feeling of being an outsider, combined with her freewheeling lifestyle, had led Chloe down a path of self-destructive behavior. During her interview with the police, Chloe admitted that she had struggled with alcoholism for years, a fact she had hidden from most of her family. She revealed that her drinking had fueled some of her worst decisions, including her entanglements with both Brandon and Melissa. According to Chloe, her affair with Melissa had started on a drunken night not long after Brandon and Melissa began dating. She described the relationship as brief but intense. It was during this affair that Chloe discovered Melissa's trans identity. Melissa, still pre-op and unable to afford gender reassignment surgery, had confided in Chloe about her struggles. Chloe claimed that while she had no issue with Melissa being trans, she realized how dangerous it would be if Brandon ever found out. Chloe's discovery of Melissa's secret became a point of tension, as she wrestled with whether to tell Brandon or keep quiet. As the police pressed Chloe for more details, she maintained that she had not been involved in the murder. She insisted that while she had fed Brandon information out of jealousy, she never intended for the situation to escalate into violence. Chloe expressed regret over her actions but appeared more concerned about the consequences of her own mistakes than about the murder itself. Investigators were struck by Chloe's nonchalant attitude during the interrogation. She seemed more interested in clearing her name than mourning the death of her brother. Still, her confession about the affair with Melissa gave police critical insight into the tangled relationships that may have contributed to the tragedy. Chloe's involvement, though indirect, made it clear that the dynamics within the Whitmore family were more complicated than they had initially seemed. On the morning of July 1, 2015, the police finally pieced together the puzzle that pointed to the true murderer, Melissa Whitmore. After days of investigating the tumultuous events surrounding the wedding, detectives determined that Melissa, in a fit of rage and humiliation, had killed her husband, Brandon Whitmore. The evidence had slowly stacked up, but it was Melissa's emotional state after Brandon's cruel outburst that finally led them to their conclusion. Brandon's public humiliation of Melissa, where he shouted, "My bride's a guy," repeatedly during the wedding reception, had been the final straw. Witnesses described how Melissa had fled the scene in tears after Brandon exposed her trans identity in front of their friends and family. What became clear to investigators was that Melissa, already overwhelmed with fear about losing her job as a high school basketball coach if her identity was revealed, snapped under the pressure of Brandon's betrayal. Brandon had retreated to the bathroom after his shocking outburst, and it was there in the church that Melissa followed him. What happened next was a chaotic and emotional confrontation. Investigators believed that Brandon, still furious and likely intoxicated, threatened to further ruin Melissa's life, sparking a heated argument. In a desperate moment, Melissa grabbed a small handgun she had concealed in her belongings. The confrontation escalated, and Melissa shot Brandon multiple times, leaving him to die in the bathroom. Defensive wounds on Brandon's body suggested that he had fought back, but the locked bathroom door indicated that Melissa had locked herself inside with him during the struggle. The murder weapon, hastily discarded in a nearby trash can, had no clear fingerprints, but it was Melissa's erratic behavior in the days following the murder that led investigators to focus on her. Friends described her as withdrawn, emotionally shattered, and on the verge of a breakdown. While Melissa had initially tried to distance herself from the crime, the police finally confronted her with the evidence on July 1. When officers arrived at her apartment to make the arrest, Melissa seemed resigned to her fate. She was calm and didn't resist. Her arrest shocked some members of the community, but to others, it seemed like an inevitable conclusion. The Whitmore family, still reeling from the public exposure of their personal secrets, had mixed reactions. Some felt relief, while others struggled to reconcile the tragedy that had unfolded. In the months following Brandon Whitmore's murder, the courtroom became a stage for the drama surrounding the murder trial of his wife, Melissa Whitmore Stanislav. The prosecutor, Jodo Adams, 42, was known for his determined demeanor and strong courtroom presence. He painted a vivid picture for the jury, arguing that Melissa acted out of rage and humiliation after Brandon publicly exposed her trans identity on their wedding day. Melissa had motive, Adams stated during the trial. She was humiliated in front of friends and family. In that moment, she saw her life unraveling before her eyes. He presented evidence from the crime scene, including the gun that was found in a nearby trash can and Brandon's defensive wounds, indicating a struggle. The prosecution aimed to convince the jury that Melissa's emotional state was a key factor in Brandon's death, arguing that it was a crime of passion. On the defense side was attorney Morel Jennings Osobranco, 36, known for her calm demeanor and thorough approach. Jennings Oso Branco argued that Melissa was not a murderer but a victim of circumstances beyond her control. This was a tragic event fueled by deep emotional pain, Jennings Oso Branco claimed. She highlighted that Melissa fled the reception after Brandon's outburst, demonstrating her emotional distress. Jennings Oso Branco painted a picture of a woman who was terrified for her future and who had not planned to kill her husband. Throughout the trial, Brandon's family sat in the front row, their emotions visible. His mother, Linda Whitmore, was often seen dabbing her eyes with tissues, while his sister, Chloe, appeared distant and somber. The emotional weight of the trial was palpable as they struggled to come to terms with the loss of their beloved Brandon and the circumstances surrounding his death. After several days of testimony, the jury deliberated for just over 3 hours before reaching a verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the jury returned. Melissa was found guilty of second-degree murder, which shocked many who had hoped for a more lenient outcome given the emotional turmoil surrounding the case. As the judge announced the sentence of 15 years to life in prison, Melissa's reaction was one of disbelief. She sat still, tears streaming down her face, while her family watched in despair. Brandon's family felt a mix of relief and sorrow, believing justice had been served but mourning the loss of Brandon and the family they once had. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of Melissa, Gina, and Chloe were forever altered. Melissa Whitmore Stanislav, now a convicted murderer, began her sentence of 15 years to life at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. The media continued to cover her case in the months following her conviction, with some outlets, such as the Columbus Dispatch, highlighting her struggle as a transgender woman in the prison system. Melissa, who had never been able to afford gender reassignment surgery, faced the daily reality of her gender identity being at odds with her surroundings. Despite her legal team's efforts to advocate for better conditions, Melissa spent her days in relative isolation. Her once promising future, a life of love and acceptance she had hoped to build, had unraveled in the most tragic way. Gina Stanislav, Melissa's mother, returned to her job as a professor of Tibetan Buddhism at Ohio State University. Originally from San Francisco, Gina was known for her academic work and dedication to breaking down gender and societal norms, often speaking about her own experiences dressing as a man and engaging in relationships with gay men, despite being married. However, the trial put her under intense scrutiny, as police had suspected she might have been involved in Brandon's murder out of love and protection for her daughter after his public outburst. Although Gina angrily denied any involvement during her interrogation, her strained relationship with Brandon and her unconventional lifestyle left her with a permanent cloud of suspicion. Her academic reputation suffered, with some of her students and colleagues questioning her past and her role in Melissa's tumultuous life. Chloe Whitmore, Brandon's sister, admitted during the trial that she was an alcoholic and had had a brief affair with Melissa, which was how she learned of Melissa's trans identity. Chloe's revelation was a bombshell in the courtroom, adding another layer of complexity to an already tangled case. Following the trial, Chloe sought treatment for her alcoholism at a local rehab facility, and her recovery became a long and difficult journey. She withdrew from the public eye, choosing to focus on healing from both her addiction and the devastating loss of her brother. As the dust settled, the tragic events of June 2015 continued to haunt all three women, their lives forever changed by a moment of explosive violence and the secrets that had been exposed. The case of Brandon Whitmore's murder reveals the deep pain that secrets, betrayal, and public humiliation can bring. It's a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful celebrations can mask the darkest tragedies.